response gets in the way. And then I always went home at night and thought about it. And I came back the next day and said, you got a point. You
Yeah.
were right. So how could we take this to the next level and make this an advantage rather than a disadvantage? You got to be able to take negative feedback to make it constructive, so to fine tune your operation. And if you have all the answers, if you're Mr. Know-it-all and you don't value what you don't know, I guess you can never really take advantage of good communications within an organization. But great communications, and that's where consultants can also be a great help, like you have always been, Ray, trying to pry out from everybody how can they operate more effectively, and then communicating that to the top so that positive actions can be taken to remedy it and optimize the company.
Well, it's kind of interesting, and I think there is a marked contrast between how we implement suggestions and the Japanese as a reference point. But I know in Japan, roughly 90% of all suggestions that are made by frontline employees are implemented. In the United States, it's just the opposite. It's 90% are not implemented. And what I've experienced is that for some reason, and I'm not sure exactly why, but here in America, people are not listened to as fully as they are in other cultures. And I think coming out of this, what we're looking for, what we're trying to suggest is that, go first to the people who know the business, who understand what has to be done, because they can open a door for you. They can make your life more meaningful. Is that consistent with what you guys are saying and what we're trying to share with the people listening?
I think it is, Ray. I think that's what it's all about, is that healthy exchange of ideas in the organization from all different levels, and then take it to the next level, listening to your customers.
Yes.
Companies spend any time really talking to their customers rather than just accepting orders. By dialogue with your customers, you can find where you can do other things for them and improve your relationship with them. And most importantly, maybe forego them leaving you because you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with your vendors. The vendors are willing to find ways to make you more profitable and provide better services to you. And you just have to listen. You have to engage them. And I don't think a lot of times we're very good at doing that.
Well, I think that's a very good point. And Ron, I want you to take this too, because basically what you just opened the door to is, yes, you have to engage the people inside, but the truth is the people on the outside may have ideas for you, and you can pivot on something innovative that the customer needs, and they're willing to give you a shot at that otherwise you wouldn't have had an idea about. Ron, have you seen that with, as you work with your customers, having them pivot either to product or service because of feedback they're getting that they may not have been paying attention to?
Well, I think fortunately most of the clients that I work with, if I'm doing a good job, that doesn't creep up on them and surprise them. They are so focused on customers that they see these things evolving way before they happen.
Right.
And, so if you're doing the right job and you're listening to both your employees and your customers, you should not be too surprised about new developments and new products. I don't disagree with what either of you has said, but I think it's important to delineate that we have to be careful about making general broad statements here where management techniques and employee feedback is concerned, because big companies are not the same as little companies. They're totally different. They only share maybe financial statements and a few other things. And I always say that a small business is not a big business, only small. It's totally different. It's completely and totally different. And so within small businesses, of course, we've got 1- and 2-man shops, entrepreneurs who are just craftspeople, want to do their work. They want to create a job for themselves. And so maybe they've got a part-time person. And then you've got 3 to 5. And yes, there's a little bit of management involved there. And then, 10 or 15, you're finally starting to get a little bit more structure. You might have to have another manager or two. So it's really important to put these in the context of who you're talking about. You know, a company that has 7 or 8 employees, an insurance company, they have very specific things that they do that are regulated, required. And if the owner is really good at what he does, he can very carefully delineate what those 6 or 7 people are supposed to do. And he may not need a whole lot of getting around the table and jawboning about how to make something a little bit better. That's a good thing to do, and it should be done periodically. I'd say it's probably as useful to listen to them so that they think that they're being listened to as it is providing good ideas. Because in very small organizations, many times employees don't have very good ideas, just as the owners don't have very good ideas. But occasionally the owner is on fire. In fact, many times the owner's on fire for what they're doing. They may be the only ones. They want to pass that on to their employees as much as possible, get them involved, get them to have the same passion that they have. And so there are times, you know, one of the big advantages of a small organization is that they don't have to sit around and jawbone about everything all the time. The owner makes a decision. They try to pull in all the facts. If they have all the facts and good financial numbers, they've spoken to their people to make sure that they haven't missed something, they should be able to make a quick decision, move on it, and beat their big competitor. So, you know, to think about how are we going to ruminate about things in a little company, that's to take the advantage away. And so I just kind of want to say, you can overdo the communication, although I don't see that very often. In fairness, it doesn't happen very often, but you want to make sure that you're fleet of foot and you can make decisions fast and you can get things implemented fast and set your priorities and all that kind of thing in a smaller organization. Now back to customers again, absolutely. I believe that if you want to know what to do with your business, you don't really need to listen to your employees nearly as much as you need to listen to your customers. Your employee has some power, but if your employee doesn't know what the customer wants, he has no power. And the question is, are they frontline people who are dealing with the customer? Can they give you feedback? Can they recognize new trends? And of course, the ones that do should be listened to very highly. But the ones who are behind closed doors and maybe doing journal entries all day long, sure, you'd like to have conversations about could they do their job better and faster and can we automate and all that stuff. Absolutely, you want to create efficiency. It'd be pretty unusual that that person would have a really great perspective on what customers want. And so getting a bunch of people together and having a broad conversation about, well, let's talk about our customers, and having the person who's in a small office and has never talked to a customer before, it's like, well, that's kind of a waste of time. So, you got to look at this carefully. And I believe in very, very proactive customer communication. That can help understand how to deal with a disruption like we've got. So if we kind of get back to disruption, yeah, we've got to deal with our employees, got to get ideas from our employees. But if you don't know who your customers are, you don't know what kind of disruption or what kind of changes you can make that would actually help the disruption. If you have a restaurant and you've closed up and you've always done fine dining with white tablecloths and you've never had your cooks do any kind of delivery service, you don't have delivery people, and you don't want to do any of that, then guess what? I mean, you're by man
toast
out of business. You are, yeah, that's your last piece of toast right there. Toast it, you're done.
Yeah.
So and this is sort of the idea. Well, but are your customers the kinds of customers that would do this? Now, recently, one client offered, again, same one, back to that one again, offered a series of meals that you could make yourself. And because they do home delivery, those meals were very well accepted. We're crunching all of the numbers right now, but we saw a 30% increase in volume, customer over customer, in a period of 3 weeks. 30%. Almost broke the wheels off the trucks. They were carrying so much. They were beating up their drivers because they couldn't handle the increased volume. They
Right.
had shortages of raw materials and products. So they had a lot of work to do to try and keep up with that. Well, the issue was what products to bring on in a short time, and would they buy products of a certain type? And we know that because we know every single profile of every single customer. So when
Right.
you know everything about the customer, you know what cars they drive, and you know their buying habits, and you understand what it is that they value about your service and your products, then you can make good decisions that can be successful in time of crisis. So what was a disruption for the restaurant that said, and I had this happen. Oh, doing takeout's not worth my time. Okay, it's not worth your time. But I guess then I'm going to have to get the same Italian recipe meal from my delivery company, and I'll spend my money with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same customer, same identical customer, the one who uses fine dining once a week. Now they're buying it at home from a different company because one of them reacted and the other one did not.
No, I think that's a real good point. What I wanted to address is kind of the point you made about your client, which is really serves us well here in terms of our conversation about what's going to happen to these companies. But the point you made is that you knew everything about the customers. And so it was easy for you to pivot. What I think Ed and I are saying is that that same attitude has to be in your mind when you're working with your employees. When a good leader understands exactly what motivates an employee, what their kids are like and all that, a person, when I've got their heart, their mind and body follow. So the more effectively we can engage the people that are there, the easier it is then to be able to serve the customers. An example, I remember I went in this one CEO's office and he had behind his desk, he had a picture of 20 golden retrievers and they were all standing up and the last one was sitting down. And I looked at him and I said, that's the oddest picture I've ever seen. He said, well, it's a reminder that if I want my people to do something, I got to repeat it over and over and over again before they finally get it. And I thought that was really helpful for me to understand what Ed and I are saying, the importance of communication in terms of engaging people, whether they're your customers, your vendors, or your employees. An engaged employee is 2 times as effective as one that isn't. And so, to me, that's what we're telling people. The question here as we kind of wrap this session up is, are we going to be able to help those who say, yes, I can do this in such a way that they can survive and they can have the cash flow that will permit them to make it through the next 3 months? Or are we going to see, from your perspective, a huge glut of people in these smaller businesses that just are simply going to close their doors?
Yes, the answer is there will be a huge number who will close their door. And, in a way, when we talk about strategy and talking to employees and those kinds of things, the horse has left the barn. These folks are already out of cash. And I've done a series of examinations of businesses, taking a look at what the PPP loan / gift is going to really do for them. And it looks to me like all it's going to do is pay the employees and lure them back into business. And if they are not allowed, and this is kind of more to the point for disruption, if they're not allowed to have an occupancy over 50 or 60%, they're going to continue to lose money for quite some time. A restaurant typically needs an 85% occupancy in order to be able to break even. So we ought to be discussing more about the mechanics of the business, like can they or should they go back into business?
Hmm.
And in a sense, the discussion about communicating with employees, I mean, that was a pretty tough discussion, and every employer I've talked to, that was like the worst day of their life when they had to let 80% of their people go.
Right.
That is always the worst day of a business person's life, is when they let people go. And so hopefully you can do that as nicely as possible. But if you'd thought ahead and if you had cash in the bank, think of the flexibility that you would have had. You could have
Right.
said, we're going to do our best to employ you. We're going to give you part pay, even though you're not going to work. We're going to have you come in and we're going to paint all together. And we're going to get some things done while we're closed. We're going to create new systems. We're going to create new products. We're going to work on content for the website. Think of all the things that could have been done. Not very many businesses are doing those kinds of things. So if you have the cash, you could have done that. Should they have had the cash? Answer, absolutely. Every business out there should have 2 months of cash. Ed, how much cash is a good amount of cash to have?
Probably a couple years worth of cash.
A couple of years.
Yeah,
Okay.
you really have to be, you have to have the wherewithal to sustain the black swan events and to invest back in the business, either through new equipment or new product ideas, whatever. You have to have that flexibility. And when you don't have the cash, your hands are tied behind your back.
Right.
So I think we're all saying the same thing. You need enough liquidity to sustain events like this. And
Right.
unfortunately, a lot of companies are finding out they're nowhere near where they need to be in that area.
Right.
And they don't have any options, which means that people that are willing to invest in some of these great products that are out there, great businesses, this is a great opportunity to buy something and relaunch it and put some money into it, make the improvements, and take advantage of the future.
Well, if I understand you correctly, and kind of wrap it up for today, what you're saying is consistent. If you know your customers and you have been able to reserve enough cash to be able to manage through the next 3 months, this could be one of the biggest opportunities in your business's career. And what we can do if they're open to this is help them understand the different elements of this to be able to get through this as best as possible. Unfortunately, there are a huge group of these that are not going to be able to make it. And I think as we talked last week, I talked about one of my clients who was a window manufacturer, and he had a list in his office there were 20 when he started, and they had a downturn, and when there was left, there were only 4 left. And he had a red line through each of them because he had, like you suggested, Ed, had set enough reserves around so he could make it through the downturn, and they couldn't.
Yeah.
So, where we're at right now is, I guess we really have to be able to help those who have prepared enough in advance to be able to weather this storm.
I also think it's really important that you have the diversity of experience behind you to look at all the angles that are possible. To hire a consultant that's only a financial expert misses out on a big part of the business. The top line revenue is extremely important, and you really don't have the expertise there to deal with it. And a lot of the stuff that Ron talked about is very critical for engaging your customers and finding new products and finding new ways of solving some of their dilemmas and some of their problems, which is an opportunity for you. And I think the one company he keeps referring to, man, they have it all going for them because they really understand their customers.
Right.
So they've been able to possibly launch some new products and grow their revenue even more with their existing customer base, which is the optimal situation. But again, it comes down to having a overall perspective of the business where you have several different perspectives where you can hash out and decide what is the best strategic direction for the company.
Right. And again, from all I was going to say is that the strategy is to reduce any uncertainty as you move forward. So you can minimize that, maximize your customers and the people inside, and et cetera, to get through this. Ron, is there anything that you want to add in kind of conclusion as we kind of wrap this up and look toward, next week?
I'm sorry, I missed. Yeah, I'll have a finishing comment. I missed the last thing you said about next week, but yeah, I think it's interesting. And as we talk it through, it comes to mind that while the strategies are difficult to identify up front, if you don't have the cash, you can't implement the strategies.
Yep.
This particular company has had this happen before. They sit on a lot of cash because they have an outside board who has outside perspectives, and they are able to bring in experiences of other successful companies that they themselves can't ever have access to. You get a CEO group and they get together, even if they're guided by a professional or someone who's been in business before, to try and keep them speaking through subjects and that kind of stuff. Somebody said to me one time, the three biggest liars in the world are three business owners talking to each other about their own business.
True.
And so I don't really have very much trust in those. And when they're in those organizations, they don't have any vested interest in each other's organizations. So to have, not necessarily a consultant, but to have highly experienced people who are on a board or an advisory board, they may or may not have, quote, voting power, but they're to be able to look at strategies and help push initiatives forward, push the owners through initiatives, is valuable. And the goal is to create cash and assets, a lot of cash, so that you can get through these events. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that when we talk about disruptions, we don't have a pandemic very often, but we have black swan events that we can all
regular.
We had one at 9/11. We had one in 2008.
We had one whenever we have a tornado or a hurricane, yeah, or a flood.
More localized. That's exactly right. So they do happen, and they happen quite frequently. So, managing risk is part of this. This same company went through 2008 in a similar fashion, except the situation was exactly the opposite. Because of the customer mix, they happen to be highly leveraged individuals. And during that period of time, so many people lost their jobs that we had a drop rate in 3 months of 30% of the entire company. 30%.
Yeah.
So then the question is, what do we do about that? At the time, we had 6 salespeople. And so we took a look at the pile of cash that was there, and we decided to take a chance. And instead of cutting back like everybody else did, we hired 12 more salespeople. Now, that's the perfect time to hire good salespeople because they've just been fired.
Right, right.
So the first thing we did was put money into more salespeople, get them out selling. The second thing we did is, again, because we knew exactly what was wrong with the customer base, we stopped going to that particular customer profile for new business. We literally did not solicit.
Right.
And then we built up a different kind of customer who had lots of extra cash, who didn't lose their jobs, who weren't leveraged with a new car and a new house and all of the stuff that the other group was. And As a result, we found a better customer. Now, that doesn't mean that we didn't go back and take those other customers down the road as they got their jobs back. Of course we did. We have them back now.
Right, right.
But
No, and truthfully, that's a very good example of how one can manage through a unexpected disruption, you know. And so I think our purpose here is to say, as a team, as an advisory board, we can offer insights to companies that they can't get inside. I've often said that small business owners tend to hire what they can afford or what they believe is important, but they never get what they need. And I think what we're trying to say here is that having the right set of advisors and being able to listen to them, whether it's your customer, your advisory board, or your employees, yields a lot of results if you're effective at being able to implement what you hear.
yeah,
So with that, I wanted to say thank you, both of you, again for another, I think, interesting episode. We're going to meet again next Friday. Is that correct? 2 o'clock?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to thank both of you again for your insights. I hope it was valuable, and I hope we can get this recorded so we can put it online for people to listen to.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you, Ed. Ron, thank you for your help and setting us up.